I want to review two movies which I would guess are not often reviewed together. The first is They Live, a 1980s horror sci-fi movie by John Carpenter. And the second is Manchurian Candidate, the original from the early 1960s, not the later remake. John Carpenter was known for making horror films. He made a movie called The Thing, which was a remake of a 1950s horror film. One of the interesting aspects of 1950s horror films is they often deal with uh, internal threats, aliens within us. In John Carpenter's The Thing, the remake, and also the original, there is an alien that kills people and then imitates them, and then goes on to kill others. And so when you're looking at other people, you don't know if they are really them or if they are the monster who imitating them. And this can create quite a lot of paranoia. There are many other science fiction and horror films in the 1950s that had a similar theme of the alien within. And critics of the time and critics today believe that this was related to political concerns in the United States during the 1950s. For example, the phenomenon of McCarthyism, where there was excessive concerns about communists who had infiltrated American government. There were a few, but the reactions to those handful of spies were wound up in large numbers of completely innocent people being having their lives changed for the worse because of such rampant paranoia. One might observe that you can see similar themes in today's politics, where we have a lot of concern about secret Muslim terrorists. And certainly this is based in reality. There have been a few, but at the extremes, the paranoia is taken to ridiculous ends. For example, we have people hypothesizing that President Obama was a secret Muslim and he's imposing Sharia law. So it's a similar phenomenon today that we saw back in the 1950s with McCarthyism and concern over communism. So this is reflected in the culture and reflected in the sci-fi movies of the 1950s. John Carpenter was certainly aware of this, and when he remade The Thing, he replicated this paranoia in the 1980s. Now in 1988, he makes this movie They Live, which again deals with the same theme. The theme now is changed. The enemy within is not some alien. Well, it still is an alien, but it's also a critique of capitalism and the super wealthy. So the aliens now are presumed to be in cahoots with capitalists and the super wealthy elite, and their purpose on Earth is to increase inequality and to victimize the middle class and the poor. Again, we can see this theme of paranoia moving from sci-fi in the 50s to sci-fi in the 80s. The difference, though, is in the 1950s, the concern was that the alien within was communist. Now, Carpenter is turning that on his head and saying, no, the alien within is really the capitalist class. So it's kind of a crude critique of 1980s unregulated capitalism and unregulated regulated greed. Beyond that, it's a pretty terrible movie. I don't understand why it's a cult classic. Aside from the politics, it's a poorly made film. I suppose when you cast a professional wrestler as your lead actor, you cannot really expect to have good acting. But there's not much of a script. The film score is terrible. Pretty much everything is awful. So I was fooled into watching this by people who consider it a cult classic. I don't consider it a classic at all. The Manchurian Candidate, on the other hand, I do consider a classic. The Manchurian Candidate is a brilliant movie. It works on two levels. On one hand, it's a political thriller, and you can just simply get caught up in the action and the storyline and let the movie carry you along. It's a great movie. But it's also a satire. It's a satire of McCarthyism. And again, in The Manchurian Candidate, we see this theme of the alien within, hiding and lurking and doing evil behind the scenes. And again, in this case of the Manchurian Candidate, we're dealing with the communist paranoia. But now the movie's made in the early 60s, and we're able to have some distance from McCarthyism, and the movie is able to satirize the excesses of McCarthyism and to portray them for being as overblown as they were. So if you're an intelligent film viewer, you can look at this and enjoy it as a satire. If you prefer to watch movies on a more superficial level, you can just enjoy it as a thriller. Or if you like me, you can try to enjoy it on both levels. I think Manchurian Candidate is just a brilliant film, much better than They Live. But they do share the same theme of the alien within who is endangering us.